Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips a balance in favor of fair use. This is from Mamma Mia. It was a safe haven for abusive people. You guys know what he really was going to say. He was going to say the P word. But for some reason, the internet keeps scrubbing the word pedophile. It was a safe haven for abusive people. Joe grew up in a cult. This is what he wants you to know. What I want them to know, this AI, whatever it is, titles require capitalized words. Not mumbo-jumbo idiot language. By Nicole Madigan, dated September 26, 2024. Okay, trigger alert. Content warning. This article contains descriptions of child sexual and physical abuse. Joe Dagford's Canadian father was living in Australia, busking on the streets when he met Joe's mom. That's usually an indication to get that F out of there. He invited her to a barbecue run by his church group. Second cue to get out of there. The children of God. At the time, they were feeling disenchanted with the world, vulnerable, and were desperately seeking a sense of belonging, vulnerable. They found it within the church. That barbecue set the tone for Joe's life and the life of his siblings, all of whom were born as active members of the church. It's not really a church. Let's just clear that up. I was born in Canada and moved to Australia as a 1-year-old, says Joe. We lived in Australia, New Zealand, and India for my first 11 years of life. The family was constantly moving, but always within the confines of the church, cult, a global operation that still exists to this day. We lived in a caravan for a couple of years, communes, even in a tent for a while. By the time he was 12, Joe had lived in 52 different locations. Each location had one thing in common, though. They were cut off from the outside world. Everyone lived in communes, share houses, etc. And then there would be gatherings of multiple communes and members from larger areas from time to time, he says. It was led by regular mailouts and publications from the upper leadership, who were always in a secret location and no one knew exactly where they were. Mail would mostly come from Switzerland. A facade of simplicity and dedication to God. Life for members of the children of God was routine-based and heavily controlled. Each day was made up of prayer meetings, devotions, or whole house sessions run by the home leaders. Just like prestigious executives. The people selected to be in charge of those living within the confines of the home, which often included multiple families. Then it was jobs, lots of housework and childcare. You know, because who else is going to do the work? The children got to do the work, right? Shares Joe. As there were so many kids, the older ones were constantly caring for the younger ones. Joe ran the dishes crew for the 3 daily meals. Of course he did. And at just 9 years old, could be running teams of up to 15 children. We had to keep quiet and hide most of the time so that no one outside the house knew how many people lived there, he shares. The children would regularly perform sing or dance routines in restaurants, schools, and aged care residencies, sometimes for people of influence. We would have to go out and sell cassette tapes and posters created by the group in order to raise funds for daily life. See, the adults in this cult are good for nothing. And if you research more into the children of God, you guys will know why I'm saying this. In order to raise funds for daily life and to send money back to the leaders, like the prestigious executives. If we weren't selling or performing, we were practicing. A sinister reality. While the church painted a picture of devotion to God in each other, the reality was a sinister world dominated by physical and sexual abuse. Joseph's physical abuse was constant, with beatings and other punishments able to be administered by an adult who lived within the home. You could be punished for two things: as slight as running down the stairs, laughing too loud, being foolish, playing too energetically, not doing what you were asked to do, immediately or to the standard deemed fit. If something happened and one of the kids wouldn't fess up, we could all be lined up and hit with fly swats, wooden spoons, paddles, bamboo, belts, anything. Sometimes the welts and marks left from spankings had to be covered up with longer clothing, even in summer when we went out busking and fundraising. We lived in fear and constantly tread on eggshells. See why I said the adults are worth nothing? Then there was the sexual abuse perpetrated under the guise of showing love as instructed by God. We existed in a heavily sexually charged environment, with sex being taken as love. And God was love, so withholding sex from someone meant you were holding back God's love from them, which meant you thought you were better than God. Because so many church members lived within the church-run living quarters, often up to 8 large families with 5 or more children, coerced sexual interactions were frequent. So you see what the adults were doing? Constantly sexually abusing the children, beating them, forcing them to go out and busk. I know what I think. I can't say it online. But according to Joe, the worst sexual exploitation took place during what was known as romantic nights or sharing nights. If you guys don't mind, go read Daniela Mestanek's book, Uncultured. She was also a child who escaped the Children of God cult. No thanks to any authorities, because the authorities didn't do anything. These nights involved prearranged sexual interactions where children under 12 were split into 2 age categories. See why he wasn't saying abusers, he was saying the P word. They censored themselves. While those over 12 were considered adults. Just like Scientology. No, I think in Scientology, all children are adults. Over 12 were considered adults for the purpose of sexual conduct. Little kids would run around with nothing but see-through pieces of cloth wrapped around them, while the bigger kids would be paired off with each other by an adult in order to perform blank acts on each other. Trying to remember the name of that guy from the Stevie Nicks band. He's a member of this, by the way. You guys can go look it up. I can't think of his name right now. I was once paired with a 9-year-old girl and a 10-year-old girl when I was just 8 years old. By age 11, the church would begin training Joe to be included in adult S interactions. He was chosen by a 30-year-old woman who would go on to sexually abuse him under the guise of preparation. You guys can just be creative in what I think about this. Sexual abuse was constant, systematic, and systemic. The group has always defended itself by saying it was a few rotten apples. But this is 100% untrue. That also reminds me of Scientology. I'm beginning to think what child in Scientology was not sexually abused. They even put out publications in the early days teaching people how to show God's love to their child, which was essentially instructions on how to groom and abuse children. They're still in full effect right now. So I guess there is a recording you guys can go listen to if you want. Daniela, see? That's the one I was talking about. A global phenomenon. The children of God were the subject of an international documentary, Children of the Cult, that describes the church as one of the world's most notorious and prolific cults. Known as the Family International, and previously, see how they like to change their names? And previously Teens for Christ and the Family of Love, the church has been accused of sexual and physical abuse on numerous occasions, with multiple former members speaking out about their alleged abuse. Despite this, the church still flourishes. You see? There's been quite a few of the children who unalived themselves too. Founded in the United States of America in the late 1960s by David Berg, the church reportedly had 10,000 full-time members in 130 communities around the world by the 1970s. Hollywood stars Rose McGowan and River and Joaquin Phoenix were born into the cult, but later escaped, which warned of a future Antichrist and promoted sex as a way of showing God's love, regardless of one's age. Joe says while many of the adult members were living under extreme coercive control, genuinely believing they were doing the right thing by God, he believes many took advantage of the rules. There were many that took a little too much joy in the abuse, both physical and sexual, of children, says Joe. I think they should all sign up for military service, put them in the front lines. They could have done a lot less and still adhered to the guidance of the rules. It was a safe haven and an incubator for abusive people. It was rampant. The escape. Despite his environment, Joe has always had a questioning mind and an intrinsic dislike for authority, for which he was often heavily punished. They always are. You're not allowed to ask any questions. I've often wondered whether I knew something wasn't right, as I had no point of reference, he says. That's the isolation. But I knew I hated what was going on and dreamed of the day I was old enough to escape or strong enough to fight back. Joe says he survived by living inside my own mind, hiding his true self and feelings, and doing whatever he could to protect himself and his younger siblings. Comply in public and rebel in private. As Joe approached his 12th birthday, his parents knew it was time to escape. They knew I would be sent to Japan or the Philippines or something, to teen training camps, and they would likely never see me again. The family's escape had to be planned meticulously and executed swiftly. At the time, They were based in India. My parents had squirreled money away and sold what we had that was of value. We had to leave the city and stay in hotels until the plane left for Australia. When the family landed in Australia, Joe and his siblings attended school and quickly developed his own internal strategies to help him adapt to normal life. I came up with a few strategies, millions and millions of tiny steps to be able to pick through the issues at a pace I could mentally handle and employ them to avoid becoming overwhelmed, he says. They didn't always work, but I dragged myself back to them in the process and have not stopped. One of my biggest advantages has been my dogged refusal to let them win, to let them have any further control of my life, and to get as far away from where I started as possible. But Joe, now 48, says the impacts have been severe and lifelong. And while I try to focus more on the benefits of my positively processed trauma, I'll forever find new ways that severe abuse during my formative years has impacted me. There are even some things I think are just part of me or one of my quirks. Then I'll see this quirk described in perfect detail in a social media post as a classic example of response to childhood trauma. Kindness and why Joe now advocates against domestic violence. Despite its impact, Joe says he can now speak about the years of abuse without feeling shaky, weak, or emotional. But when he talks about acts of kindness shown toward him throughout his life, he becomes completely undone. Kindness is entirely disarming. For starters, I didn't get much of it in it and had issues with feeling I was worthy of it. Kindness is a universal power and appeals to each and every human's inner child, which is a vulnerability in each of us. As well as running his multi-million-dollar company, Foreshore Projects, Joe is an ambassador for domestic violence charity, Friends with Dignity, which directly assists women and children who have escaped a domestic violence situation. I like this charity because they are secular, the management is directly involved, they have an amazing funds raised to action delivered ratio, and they hit the problem in the field. They get down and dirty at a grassroots level, says Joe. I would like to show through my example that you can be a strong masculine man and still be unashamedly kind and gentle. We don't need to surrender our masculinity, but we want calm, kind, loving co-parents, husbands, team members, and partners who know they don't own their partners, who respect that our partners have the right to leave us if they choose to do so. It takes far more strength to be kind, understanding, and respectful when things don't go our way than it takes to be violent and controlling. Men need to step up, take responsibility, and focus on emotional intelligence. Joe says while he's been able to carve out a successful life that includes actively helping others, he says the healing journey is never really over. I started consciously working on my healing from age 12. I'm now 48 and the journey is far from over. The heaviness never leaves. It just gets easier to live with and carry. If this has raised any issues for you or if you just feel like you need to speak to someone, please call 1-800-RESPECT, 1-800-737-732. Sorry, there's a number missing there, you guys. Just go with the 1-800-RESPECT. The National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counseling Service. If this brings up any issues for you, contact Bravehearts, an organization dedicated to the prevention and treatment of child sexual abuse. 1-800-272. That doesn't have all the numbers. Hold on, I'm going to look it up. Well, you guys, I tried to find their phone number. I don't see a phone number, but you can go to their website, Bravehearts, and they have a little form you can send them an email if you need help. So I'll leave the link in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Otherwise, have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.